My talk, as was suggested there, is all about feedback, effective feedback without marking. To start with, what I want to do is just share a little story with you to give you an idea about what marking is like in the classroom. In my school and in every school around the country, you can find yourself in a little bit of a bubble in the classroom. You don't think the outside world really exists to some extent. So what I'd like to do is just take you through a little bit of feedback that I received recently. I'm very open and honest and transparent with the children in my class. I believe in sharing all my successes and all of my failures with them, often to my detriment, because the hope is that we can build well-rounded, resilient learners in the classroom. So, with that in mind, I brought up TEDx, told them, look, this is coming up, it's quite exciting, and they seem pretty excited too. And they said, well, can we have a look at the website? Yep, no problem, pop the website up, and then this picture appeared. Now, I don't like having my picture taken. I find it quite awkward. As the picture went up, this is some of the stuff that I ended up hearing from my class. And I do love them, but the first thing was this. A child looked at it, cringed a bit and said, something isn't really right. And yeah, something isn't right. I'm not feeling comfortable here at all. I wasn't particularly happy having my picture taken. You're absolutely right. Something's not quite right here. That's not the teacher you're used to seeing. Then this one. The thing is, you look weird. I do look weird. It's not natural. You're right. I look weird. Thank you. Next one. It's just embarrassing. It's just embarrassing. Yes, I know. I'm feeling that now, children. Thank you. I am embarrassed. Thanks for that. Then this one. Couldn't even come up with a real phrase. Just hung their head in shame. Oh, my days. Mr. Coles, my days. And I was thinking, yeah, you and me both, buddy. Yeah, okay, I want to kind of get out of the room now. And then all of that combined was okay. I could deal with that. I deal with those sorts of comments on a daily basis. That was okay. But then it kind of went silent. And then this came out of nowhere. The problem I had with this one is that, firstly, I wasn't aware that I looked cringy. And put aside the grammatical issues we've got with the word cringy, wasn't aware that I looked it. Now I'm having to face up to the fact that apparently I look cringy. And secondly, I'm encouraged to question the reasoning behind my cringiness. As if it was some sort of purposeful decision by me to stand in front of the camera and go, how can I make myself look as cringy as possible here? Now, I could have taken that feedback. I could have gone back to my desk, sat there with my head in my hands, thought about the issues that I was facing, the bigger world problems that I was coming across. Maybe starting to think to myself, well, maybe I'm not confident. Maybe actually I'm masking deep insecurities, and these children are starting to But obviously, I knew what they were like. I was used to the children. I laughed, we moved on. But the key message about this is that feedback is constant. It's everywhere. It's how we choose to respond to it. If anything, feedback is really important because it challenges us. It challenges what we think is the norm and what's okay, and what's maybe got a bit boring and safe. So this brings us to the story of the school that I work in. The clicker's going to work. And looking at marking. Now, as a teacher, and many of you that may be involved in education will know, marking is just one piece of the puzzle. I'm not saying that it is the only piece. It's one piece of the puzzle, but it's quite a big piece, or was. So I want to talk to you a little bit about marking in context and what's out there, because you may not be familiar. I'm going to go through a few statements here, or phrases, that schools around the country use to describe their marking policy. Now, bear with me with this. I did a bit of Googling to get some of these. So the first one is this: feedback sandwich. Anybody heard of the feedback sandwich? You may have heard of it in a slightly different term, but I'm not going to mention that now. So the idea that there's something positive, you've done really well in this, and here's something you need to work on, and then let's end on a really nice, lovely note and see you later. That's the feedback sandwich. So that's out there. Schools have got that as a policy. We've got think pink, go green. If you see pink, you better have a think about it. And if you see green, go for it. Well done. Okay, it's quite common. We've got this one, a bit unusual, plus, minus, equals. I get the plus, I get the minus. I'm not quite sure what the equals is. If you put that in a child's book, are you looking for a balance of something? I don't know, but that exists. The next one, traffic lights and faces. This was very common for a while. So the idea of putting a red dot in a child's book if they'd done something wrong, an amber dot if they needed to work on something, and a green dot if, yay, they've hit the success criteria, they've done something right. And similarly, faces, which I've always hated. The idea of having faces in your book, a sad face if you've done something bad, neutral face if you've got something to work on, and a smiley face if you've done really well. It can have all sorts of effects on children's self-esteem and things. This one, very odd wording, tickle me pink. I won't go into it, don't really know. And then this one, the red pen of power. The idea that when you see red pen in a book, editing is happening, and that's powerful. That means progress. These are all things that exist out there in schools around the country. For us, our marking strategy worked like this. We would get a piece of writing from a child. Firstly, we'd get our pink and green highlighters, and we'd go to town on that piece of work. So we'd highlight things in green that we thought were working, highlight things in pink that we thought needed changing. Once we'd done that, we'd then find 3 spelling mistakes, underline those, identify them at the end of the work. Once we'd done that, we'd then write 3 stars, 3 comments to say, haven't you done well, okay? Then after that, we'd then draw a thought bubble, and it did need to be a thought bubble, that was in the policy, okay? Had to be a thought bubble, for something that the child had to do to move their learning on. And the idea was that they would act upon it. So we'd take these books back and take them home, spend a few hours marking, and then the next day deliver those books to the children, ready for them to give their feedback to us and respond to the feedback. The reality never really worked out like that. And what I'd like to do now is actually share with you a quick video from some of the children in the school that I work in. They are going to talk about their experiences of marking before we made the change, but the video actually starts with some of the children talking about what feedback means to them, which I think is just as important as me standing on the stage and telling you what it means to me. Okay?
Well, feedback is when someone tells you where your errors are, where you can improve, and I think it's quite important because if you didn't have feedback, you might never realise your errors, and realising your errors means you can improve and make it better and just be the best that you and it can be.
Feedback is telling people, praising people and telling them where they need to improve. Feedback can actually really impact on someone and make them think a lot better about themselves.
We'll focus on what I'm doing well on for a few minutes and kind of go over how we think I've got to that stage, and then we'll focus on my errors and we'll look through the ways that I got better at the other things, and then we'll kind of apply that.
Not really.
No.
Not really.
No.
Absolutely not.
In the past, when we did marking, I didn't really take it seriously
Because when we did have marking, I used to go straight past it, and I used to not do anything about it because I thought it was just a comment, so I just went straight past it.
Yeah.
Yeah, also you'd only put your initials next to the comment, and the teacher saw it and oh, they've took the feedback, and actually you might not even have understood what they've said.
A lot of people, sometimes it's go back and edit this paragraph, and then people will just say, they'll sign their initials, they'll change one word, and then teachers will see that as done, but actually that's not helping at all, is it? That's not helping where, I remember I did that once and I actually went down in my writing for the next couple of weeks when I kept doing that, because it just doesn't help. I think composite is a lot better, isn't it?
Yeah.
When I would get my book back, most of the time I would ignore the star or what I needed to do. I looked at all the positive comments and thinking to myself, oh, that's really nice.
That boy at the end there sort of expresses the message better than I could. That's kind of the issue that we've got there. It's lovely that he was sat there at the end of the video saying, oh, that's really nice. But that's not the point of feedback, is it really? We're trying to move learning on. We're trying to develop. And actually, if we just sit down and look at all the positive stuff and take that on board and smile and say, that's really lovely, it's not really doing its job. Hence why the change needed to come in. Now, what the research really tells us on this is pretty simple. The Education Endowment Foundation is a charitable organisation that took on thousands of schools, thousands of pieces of data, and put it all together to look at how best to add months to a child's development. And it was no surprise to people working in education that feedback came out on top in the end. There's another example there of extending school time, which didn't really add a lot to children's development. But feedback came out on top. It's low cost, it's low risk, and it's got a high yield. In fact, it actually concluded that it would plus 8 months onto a child's development with high quality feedback. So that's quite impressive in terms of a statistic, but feedback in general is so broad, so broad. And we decided that marking wasn't going to be the thing that we needed to do. In fact, it was our head teacher that made the decision, quite a brave decision, I would say, in our current climate, to take marking and get rid of it. Because at the time, marking was evidence for the sake of evidence. It wasn't for the sake of the pupil. And that's at least how we felt. Judging by comments on the BBC video, a lot of teachers out there feel the same. So something needed to change. She knew that, we knew that, and she made the decision a couple of years ago to do that. The alternative was conferencing. We came back after summer holidays. We were all refreshed and ready to go. And usually at our meetings back at school after a summer holidays, it's usually, I don't know if it's the same in other schools, but it's usually a kind of list of all the things that we've got coming up. So you come in with loads of energy and you often leave thinking, oh my goodness, why did I even come back? But when she opened her mouth and said, I'm getting rid of marking, you could look around the room and it was palpable, the excitement in the room from this comment. Conferencing was the alternative. What is conferencing? Conferencing is a conversation with a child on a fortnightly basis for 10 or 15 minutes where we go through their work, dedicated time to them. Often we'll have work out in front of us and we'll be going through it with the child. It's a dialogue between the child and the teacher. So it's not us dictating anything, it's us having a conversation. At the end of that conversation, we then usually come to some sort of joint conclusion, which would then form a target, which would then be monitored and seen in 2 weeks' time and reviewed at the next conferencing session. So that was the plan, and that's how we wanted it to work. The best thing about this for a lot of the teachers was that it was goodbye to the marking trolley. I don't know if you've ever seen teachers wandering around in the real world. The children seem to think that we don't exist in the real world when they see us in supermarkets. It's like this. But often teachers leave school with these specially designed sort of trolleys full of books and make that long journey to their car. And it was always so depressing and so demoralising to see that and to know that you were going home with these books. And actually, do you know what? At the weekend, you might not even have a chance to even touch them, but I'm going to take them home anyway because that's my job as a teacher, is to take these books home and mark them. So that was gone. I've explained to you already what conferencing is about, but the theory behind it is that we could empower the children. That conversation with the child meant that more onus was put on them. It wasn't coming from us, it was coming from them and their understanding of their learning. Metacognition and the process of thinking about your own thinking and understanding how you learn best is proven to be one of the most crucial skills for any learner. And conferencing lends itself to that skill, in my belief and in many others. So what's the impact been? We've been doing it now for 2 years, roughly. I would say the first thing that it's shown me is it's revealed the hidden barriers that we would have never seen through marking. Marking was based purely on academic progress. It looked at gaps in knowledge and it tried to fix those. Often it would skim over the surface. With conferencing, what I have found is that often the issues are down to attitude with a pupil. It might be self-esteem issues. It might be emotional or social issues that they are facing. Something may have happened at home over those few weeks that I had no idea about, and that's actually what is affecting the child and their progress, rather than the fact that they don't know how to do a formal method of multiplication. So it revealed things that we didn't even know were there. We knew they were there, but we hadn't had a chance to actually talk to the children and get to know them. So conferencing allowed us to do that. Secondly, happier learners. Now, I've got no graphs or no data to show you to prove, look at child A, look how much happier they are now. However, from talking to the children, they seem so much more comfortable and confident in themselves now, talking about their learning and having targets that they can reel off really quickly, that I can't imagine that they're feeling any less happy as a result of conferencing. In fact, I remember speaking to my class months into this process and saying to them, what do you think now that marking's gone? They hadn't even realised it had gone, some of them. Genuinely, the response to that question was it? Oh. That was the genuine response. And it proved to me straight away that they had no value in it. They didn't see the value. Happier teachers. Now, contrary to a lot of comments that we did receive or some comments that we received on the Facebook video, the BBC video, this was not just a way of giving teachers an easier time, with your 6 weeks holiday at summer and all that sort of thing. What do you think you're moaning at? That wasn't the fundamental reason for this. Yes, our workload has reduced. We're not taking those books home. But it was more about the demoralising nature of that task has gone, and it has been replaced with more time and energy spent into replanning lessons, looking at learning, trying to make it as engaging as possible, which I think has helped overall with the mental health and well-being of teachers, which is a massive issue at the minute in the teaching profession, in Peterborough particularly. So happier teachers, good in my books. And then finally, progress. As teachers, we are concerned with all sorts of different things in education, but ultimately we're measured on progress, and progress is what we're interested in. We're not necessarily interested in measuring the child at the end of their journey. What we're interested in is how far can you go? How can we help you on that journey? And the great thing about conferencing was that the children knew more about that. Sitting down with the teacher, they could look at the progress they had made in their books, and it was made self-evident to them. Here's where you're improving. Look at how much progress you've made. Oh, here's a mistake here, but we can work on that. There's a mantra that a lot of people may know about with the term failure or fail. First attempt in learning is how it's known in my classroom and in lots of classrooms around the country as we try to break down those barriers with children. Conferencing helps to do that. And again, it's early days at the minute. We're at 2 years in, but if you take one thing from what I'm saying here, it's not that conferencing is the answer, but maybe an alternative to marking is. So, drawing this to a bit of a close now, the power of effective verbal feedback is really the crux of what I'm getting at here. And if I think about the power of effective verbal feedback in the classroom, I tend to think of these things. The first thing is to inspire. I have seen so many success stories now from conferencing with children where they've come away feeling inspired to go and try something new. And to not avoid something because they're scared of failure, but instead go and have a go. And the following week rush in with some work they've done at home completely off their own back because they were inspired to go and do that and get better and make progress. So I think it has that power. I think it has the power to build confidence. As uncomfortable as it might be for some children to be forced to sit down with your teacher and look at them and speak to them about their work, might be uncomfortable for some, it's been hugely beneficial. So we've had children who've come out of their shells who would normally hide away from this sort of conversation and not want to have it. And they are then labelled as the shy children in class. Well, actually, maybe they just haven't had the opportunity to talk to the right person or talk under the right circumstances. So it is no doubt that it has built confidence. It's had the ability to heal self-esteem. There have been a few occasions where seemingly something that I thought was just microscopic in importance has been the thing that has been plaguing a child. There was a child that was struggling with division, okay? It's something that we teach in school, in every single year group leading up through primary school. For me, it's an objective. You've got to learn how to divide a number. You're not getting it. That's okay. No problem. You're not getting it yet. We have that conversation. That's as deep as I thought it went, but this particular child was losing sleep over this. Was going home and feeling anxious because they kept getting it wrong in their mental arithmetic tests each week. And no matter how much I stood at the front and said, I don't care if you're getting it wrong, as long as we're working towards something, they were still going home and crying and getting upset. So by talking that through and having that conversation with the teacher, it helped to build their self-esteem. Real dialogue. Marking was so impersonal and cold. It wasn't real life. How many of you in your jobs at the minute get a piece of work given back to you marked in that sort of manner with a little wish written at the bottom in quite a patronising way, actually, now that I think about it, with 3 stars that you did really well? It's just not real life. It isn't, and it wasn't getting them ready for it. So it opened up a real dialogue between pupil and teacher. We learnt things about the children that we had no idea about. The children learned things about themselves and the teachers that they had no idea about either. And it developed language. This is a big point for me, is that I am increasingly frustrated with the language that children use when they talk to you. So many of them are hidden behind keyboards and screens these days that the language they use isn't well thought through. They're never put on the spot to have a full-blown conversation with somebody and be expected to listen and respond to that conversation for 5 minutes. It's amazing how difficult they find that. And conferencing, again, maybe it was uncomfortable for some of them, has forced them into that dialogue. And we can then correct some of that as well in that dialogue. They're seeing an adult talk to them and mirroring the way that that needs to happen and the way that that works. And I think that's profoundly important too. So this has a huge impact. Yes, we use conferencing at our school at the minute. I'm not saying that it's one size fits all. But I think there are still schools out there who rely too heavily on marking. In fact, I know there are. I've spoken to teachers in the Peterborough area who still follow things like this. and still spend hours doing a task that's not helping the child, it's not helping them in terms of their mental health and well-being. They think it's helping Ofsted, it's not, and outside agencies that are coming into the school, it really isn't. And I think things need to change. And the best advocates for this at the minute are the children in the school, who seem to be absolutely loving the process. And why wouldn't you really, I suppose? There are issues with it. We're working through its early days, but like anything, you need to take a risk and you need to jump in before calling it a day. So I'm going to leave the talk today just with one final short video. And this is a group of children from the school as well, talking about their experience of conferencing, but also messages that they would have for schools that are still marking.
In year 5, I thought my writing was perfect, and to be honest, I thought nothing was wrong with it. But when conferencing came in year 6, I saw my writing in a completely different way, and I never looked at my writing the same. And I always used a thesaurus or anyone I could to help check my writing or just help me develop my writing further so it can be the best it could be.
If you could give your teachers any feedback to help them improve, what would you tell them?
Oh gosh, that is a very hard one.
Maybe let's be more free with what we could talk about in our conferencing.
Maybe have some more, have some constructed working, but make it more free for maybe the students.
I'd say maybe have a fun lesson or something that's more exciting every day rather than once or twice a week.
Yeah.
Well, I'd probably just say your conferencing would make your children's writing amazing, and it would make them go past the limit that they could go with marking.
Interestingly, within that, the feedback that they offered teachers, I think that was directed at me. I have taken it on board. Freedom came up a little bit, and I love the idea that could we maybe just have something fun every now and again? I've noted it, I'll work on it. I hope that has given you somewhat of an insight into what's going on in the schools in the Peterborough area and the wider community as well when it comes to feedback. And that if you take one thing from this, it's that any little bit of feedback can be so powerful for anybody's development, whether they're a child or an adult. Thank you very much.